So welcome along. Rob Staten here from SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Going to give my views on the Leonard Williams trade. And if you want to join in via the live chat, please do. Super chats will get priority. So if you've got a comment, if you want to pass comment on the Leonard Williams trade, stick a super chat in. I'll come straight to that. Later on, I'm sort of willing to chuck some comments in and have a bit of a Q&A because it's just a solo stream. So we'll do that a little bit later on. But in the meantime, if you have got a comment or if you just want to help support the channel, then super chat away. So really surprised. I did kind of have a feeling that the Seahawks might do something before the trade deadline. I wrote an article last week saying that I didn't think the Seahawks are going to be buyers. Great foresight there. But then they added Frank Clark to replace Uchenna and Wosu. And now they've traded for Leonard Williams. And I must admit, there was a point to me as we were doing the stream last night, and I was chatting to Adam at the end, that the way that the NFC was shaping up with the fact that the Niners have lost 3 games in a row, they've gone from a team that before this 3-game run that they were on, we were all probably thinking, who's going to beat this team? That is it the Eagles or nobody? And ultimately that they had a chance to go really deep into the postseason, probably win a Super Bowl. And we were making that assessment, halfway through October. And I'm listening to Rob Stats Guerrera yesterday doing his podcast, sort of his version of what we do at the end of the games. And they're talking about they're blowing it up in San Francisco and completely redoing the roster, that essentially the group that they have in San Francisco has run its course, which felt to me a little bit premature to go down that road. But that's what they were saying. I'm just reflecting on what they were saying. So that's where the Niners are. The Eagles are sort of motoring along, finding a way to win, but are doing it in a distinctly unimpressive fashion. They don't look great while they're doing it. So, they're sort of where they are. They don't look unbeatable. The Niners have lost 3 in a row. They're not even in first place in the division anymore. The Vikings look really good against San Francisco. You could have thought, well, if Justin Jefferson gets back, maybe if they make a deadline deal, that they could become the team that they were last year and maybe be a threat in the NFC. Kirk Cousins is out for the season. So now they're kind of left wondering, what do we do now to sort of deal with this for the rest of the season? So, and then there's Detroit, who, Detroit went to Kansas City and won, and they've had a decent start to the season. They've also been absolutely blown out by the Ravens, and Seattle beat them in week 2. So I think the Seahawks looked at the landscape of where the NFC was last night, and they've been very, very aggressive. Very aggressive. They have decided that they want to make a big trade to give themselves the best possible opportunity to be the top team in the NFC, sensing that there's a window or a door opening and they want to walk through it. And because of that, I think a lot of people will reason this trade in a positive sense. They will feel like it was well worth being aggressive to try and win now. And a lot of people will have that opinion. I have a slightly different opinion. I think that all of that is plausible. And if the Seahawks had gone out and landed somebody who was, legit blue chipper at a good age, even if it had cost them their first round pick, maybe, I think it would have been, I would have been one of those people saying, oh, wow, what a ballsy move. Can't dislike it. I don't know who that player would have necessarily been. The problem that I have with this trade is that, Leonard Williams he's a decent player, but he's not a game wrecker at this stage in his career. He's never really been a game wrecker at all. He was probably close to that in 2011 when he had 2020 when he had 11 sacks in a contract year for the Giants after they traded a 3rd-round pick for him. But last year he had, I think it was 2.5 sacks, and this year he's got 1.5. Is it the other way around, or am I right in saying that? So he had 2.5 sacks last year, and he has 1.5 sacks this year. He is currently the 37th highest graded interior defensive lineman. His PFF grade is 67.6. That's 0.4 better than Mario Edwards Jr., already on Seattle's roster. So I don't think they've acquired somebody who is necessarily going to elevate this team to a significantly better level. They are better because Leonard Williams is a decent player, but I don't think this is the wow. Rest of the NFC are thinking they're quivering in the boots now because the Seahawks have traded Leonard Williams. I just don't see it that way. And then adding to the fact that, the second round pick is Seattle's second most prized asset for next offseason, with the first rounder obviously being at the top. And now they've traded that away for 10 games of Leonard Williams. And as we sort of sit here today, they may well have every intention of re-signing Leonard Williams. That could happen. I kind of hope it does, because I think second rounder spent on a rental. We've been there, done that with Sheldon Richardson. And that was the kind of thing that I was thinking of right now. A second round pick to not even get a full season of Leonard Williams would be, I think that'd be a tough investment unless Seattle make a really deep playoff run. If he comes in and the Seahawks, get to the NFC Championship game and nearly make a Super Bowl, I think you could say, okay, well, they had a good go at it. If they only get to the wild card round and go out, or the divisional round again and get knocked out, it's going to be really hard if then Leonard Williams moves on to square the circle of spending a second round pick and a fifth round pick the following year for 10 games of somebody who is, 29 years old. Like I say, has only got 1.5 sacks this year, 2.5 sacks last year, and is currently the 37th highest graded defensive lineman. That's going to be a tough sell. When the Rams did something like this for Von Miller in 2021, Von Miller came in, he was still playing at an extremely high level. He was more or less at a sack a game for the Rams, and they won a Super Bowl. I don't think Leonard Williams in 2023 is where Von Miller was 2 years ago for the Rams. I just don't. And like I say, if they had brought somebody in, even with this extremely aggressive move for a second rounder, who was perhaps closer to that Von Miller level, then it would have been easier to sort of say, I understand why they've done this. I think this is a very aggressive move, but maybe also quite a risky and reckless move to bank on Leonard Williams for just the 10 games, 10 regular season games. I mean, look, there's all sorts of things that can happen here. He missed 5 games last year. If he misses time between now and the end of the season, you're not getting 10 games of him. What if he gets injured in week one? I know that can happen to anybody, but see what I mean? Is then it is just a waste of second. You might as well just flush the second round pick down the toilet, which is again your second biggest asset. So, like I said, I don't think the value of the trade is fantastic. I think it will also be tough if, say, someone like Baltimore, for example, trades a second round pick for Montez Sweat or Chase Young in the next 24 hours. That would be difficult, because they would be getting a young player who, like Roquan Smith a year ago, and I'm going to dig out the details of the Roquan Smith trade, because I think I remember rightly that he was acquired for a second round pick when he went to Baltimore. Okay, he was. In fact, the terms of that deal are almost identical to this deal, so I will come back to that in a bit. But let's say that they trade a second round pick and a fifth for Chase Young or Montez Sweat. They were getting a pass rusher who is 27 years old, Montez Sweat, or 24 years old, Chase Young, who they'd have the flexibility to franchise them off the back of their rookie contracts, extend them, have them for multiple years, for them to be cornerstone players. That, to me, would be understandable for a team like that. With this being for a player who turns 30 next year and he's not in the prime years and stuff like that, it's a little bit harder to take. I mean, how many years, even if they extend Leonard Williams, how many years of top play can you expect? And he'd have to regain that top level of play to even be considered in that bracket in the first place. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking. I think, if Montez Sweat comes in next week, you would imagine that he could be a serious threat against the Ravens. My fear is that we'll be lining up against him next week because the Ravens have made a trade. I'm just throwing that out there. And then when you actually think about the Roquan Smith trade, because look, you have to sort of compare these things. It's one of the reasons why I had an issue with Jamal Adams trade. You kind of look at what other players who've been dealt cost. Like the Jamal Adams trade, in hindsight, compared to, say, the Tyreek Hill trade, is not good value. It's awful value in comparison. So Leonard Williams has cost Seattle a second rounder and then a fifth round of the year after, Roquan Smith cost the Ravens a second rounder and a fifth rounder in the same draft. So it's slightly different. But Roquan Smith only turned 26 this year. So when they traded for him, he was 4 years younger than Leonard Williams. And they were able to extend his contract. And I think they've been able to extend his contract and keep him, unless I'm mistaken there. Yes, they did. He signed a 5-year, $100 million deal in January. So I hope I'm making myself clear here. This is, when you compare it to that trade, it's hard to compare 10 games of Leonard Williams with years of Roquan Smith at his peak age with the Ravens. And I'm a bit worried that, like I say, that something like Sweat or Young is going to be traded in the next 24 hours, and it's going to make this deal look a little bit worse. There are other things that are more positive that I want to come on to, or more positive with regards to the value of this trade, but I want to get through the super chats that have come in. David says, keep it up, boss man. Always excited to get your thoughts on the team. Thanks for putting this on. My pleasure, David. Thank you for the super chat. He's also sent another one in saying 144 viewers. That's doubled now. So like the video, like he says, really helps the channel. If you are watching, please like the video. It will help with the channel. Taker610 says this closes the door on getting DeForest Buckner from Indy. Taker610, I don't think that door was ever open. They may well have asked a question. I'm convinced they'll have asked the question of Washington and Jonathan Allen as well, because he just screams Seahawks. But if teams aren't willing to trade, they ain't willing to trade. DeForest Buckner's one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, and Indianapolis have never given any indication. There's never been even even a rumor that DeForest Buckner was available. So I don't know why Seahawks fans ever really got the hopes on that. That was never on the cards. Ty says, this is a move you make when you have a franchise quarterback, not a bridge QB. The move is exciting, but this scares me. They believe in Geno long term. I must admit, I have some of those reservations. I will come on to them in a little while. There's maybe another side to it to look with that. Thank you for the super chat. Jed says, here's hoping this is like the Dwayne Brown trade. Pro Bowl level player who becomes the best player on the line. Big risk, though. Yeah, Jed, you have to hope that that's what it's going to be. But in order to do that, they will have to re-sign Leonard Williams, and there's going to be some issues there with that. I'll come on to that in a sec. And the other thing with the Dwayne Brown trade, unless I'm mistaken, that was a third-round pick, or was it a second and a third? I can't remember. I think it might have been a second and a third, actually. So, yeah, hopefully it works out like that. That wasn't a bad trade in the end. But, they've got to keep him beyond this year for any kind of talk like that. And Slacker Hero says, don't understand how this front office gambles so much on these types of trades. Graham, Sheldon Richardson, Jamal Adams, and now this, shaking my head. If you want to send in a super chat, please feel free. Thank you to everybody who has so far. Helps the channel. Really appreciate it. So on the cap thing, this is the problem that the Seahawks are going to have, because I've been seeing people saying, look, they may well have the intention of keeping him, and they may well do. But the Seahawks, according to Over the Cap, currently have, this is updated as of now. So this is updated in the last 24 hours. I don't know if something's happened that I've missed, but they're saying that the Seahawks are now up to $6.1 million in terms of effective cap space for next year. So that's $6.1 million is how much you have to spend. They have $17 million in cap space. Some of that will go on various other things that are accounted for. So you have a flat $6 million to spend. You will have 41 players in contract when the season ends. So you've got a lot of work to do there. They have a lot of free agents. So with that $6 million, they will need to replace the following players. Let me just run through this. Free agency. Here we go. So these are the players who will be out of contract in the offseason. Leonard Williams, Bobby Wagner, Phil Haynes, Drew Lock, Devin Bush, Noah Fant, Jordan Brooks, Evan Brown. Darrell Taylor will be a restricted free agent. Mario Edwards Jr., Damian Lewis, Colby Parkinson, DJ Dallas, Michael Jackson will be a restricted free agent. And there's various others. Miles Adams is an exclusive rights free agent. Jake Curhan, restricted free agent. Frank Clark's a free agent. So, basically what I'm saying is that $6.1 million has to go. It has to stretch a long way. Now, there are things they can do to free up money. They could cut Quandre Diggs and save $11 million. So it's not a massive saving, but they could do that. They could designate Jamal Adams as a post-June 1st cut and save $16.5 million and spread the dead cap hit out. Still very expensive dead cap hit, but they could save $16.5 million if they want to cut Jamal Adams in the offseason. If they wanted to cut Geno Smith as a post-June 1st, they would save $22.5 million. So basically, the point I'm getting at here is if they want to retain Leonard Williams, it's going to come at a cost. It's for me, it's now become, next year you can keep Leonard Williams, but you're probably going to have to lose Jamal Adams. Or you can keep Leonard Williams, but you might have to cut Geno Smith. That's the kind of play. Someone is going to have to go. They're not going to be able to retain all of these players with $6.1 million. And, based on the way that Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner are playing, I suspect they'll want to keep hold of both of those players. So, something's going to have to give here. Something is going to have to give. And you're going to need some money to replace certain players and stuff like that. So if you lose a whole bunch of players, you can't draft to fill every hole, especially now you've not got a second round pick next year. So that, again, prevents you from spending a high pick to fill a hole. If you wanted to say, okay, in round 2, we want to go and replace Damian Lewis, you can't do that now. If you want to spend a second round pick on a linebacker, you can't do that now because you've taken a pick away. So they've made things a lot harder in that regard to be all in on this season. And for me, I don't, even with the team at 5-2, I don't feel like I'm watching a team right now who is one 29-year-old decent defensive tackle away from being, wow, they're going to take on all comers and win a Super Bowl. So that's just sort of my take on it. There are going to be some pitfalls there. Now, the portal, I'm just sorry, I read a comment there and it's thrown me off guard. The positive that I was going to come on to, and it's a positive to an extent, is that I don't think it's a good 2024 draft class. You will have heard me on streams in the past and in various articles. What I do is a horizontal board, and it's pretty much there where I could publish it, but I want to see more games and adjust the board to before sort of revealing it, because there's no point. If I put a player in round 2 now, and then he has an amazing last month of the college football season, and then I want to move up to round 1, I might as well just wait a month and then give you the full picture. There's no point putting it out now. So I'll put it out at the end of the college football season. I can tell you right now that it doesn't look like a good draft class. I see very few players worthy of a first-round pick. I've got 3 legit first-rounders, which is, I can never imagine having as few as that. And I can tell you the 3, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Brock Bowers. And then I have players who I personally feel I would be prepared to draft them in round 1, but I don't feel comfortable saying legit first round. I call them fringe first rounders. But, some of these guys are going to go very, very early because there just aren't that many legit first rounders. This is a group that includes Rome Odunze. It includes Tyler Goyton, the right tackle at Oklahoma. It includes Drake May. It includes Spencer Rattler, who I believe is as good as that. So, there's a few others as well. I've got 9 who fit into that category. And then I've got 32 second round grades at the minute. So, if you would say to me, okay, Rob, what's the best thing to do in a draft like this? It'd probably be to, forget positional need, forget specific players. What is the best thing to do right now? I'd say at this very early stage, it will be to trade out the first round, because you ain't going to get a first round pick if you're picking in the 20s at the earliest, you are not going to get a first round level player in the 20s. So trade down, get some more stock, pick in round 2 anyway, get better value in that regard. That's probably what a sensible thing would be to do. So the Seahawks will probably be picking in round 2, but they're a pick down. So they've got an extra third rounder. Okay, but this is essentially the plan that I think the Seahawks are going to do. So if you want to qualify it that way, you could say the draft is set up for a trade down in the first round to pick once in the second, twice in the third, maybe 3 times if you can somehow coax a third round pick out of somebody, depending on how far you're willing to trade into round 2. There you go. So I'm just trying to sort of explain that the value of the draft, because it's something that probably I suspect a lot of people haven't gone to the extent that I have to put this. This horizontal board takes up all of my spare time watching tape. And I do think it is something of value that I can bring to the table in this regard when I'm sort of explaining that it's not a great draft. It's not a deep draft. You're probably not going to get a first round talent in the first round. So trading down into the second round might make sense if you can do it. And therefore, it maybe diminishes the need to sort of have first, second, 2/3 and stuff like that. What it does change, though, is, and this is something I was kind of leaning into a little bit, is if I personally do not think Geno Smith is playing well enough at the moment to warrant faith long term. Like, I'm comfortable with him being the starter now. I don't want him benched. I don't think that Drew Lock will be better. I think everybody's kind of a bit intrigued to see how we do, but at the same time, I'm not calling for Geno to be benched. But I am also equally not calling for him to be paid between $33 and $41 million next year, which is what he's going to earn. I would prefer the Seahawks to either move off that, bring that dramatically down, find another bridge who can throw 9 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in 7 games, and draft somebody to sit behind either Geno or somebody else. That is my plan. That is my plan. And I think it's fair. I think that's a fair thing. And if you're going to do that, I'd like the opportunity to be aggressive if there's a quarterback that you really like to go and get him. And without a second round pick, you make it harder to trade up, I would suggest. Unless you just want to throw future first rounders. So that's a possibility as well. But I'm not necessarily a massive fan of that if you can just use stock next year, not a great draft. So that's one thing. The other thing is, you take the second rounder away. Are you sort of, with one pick in the first 2 rounds, are you in a better place, or you're in a worse place, aren't you, to go and get the quarterback that you want? You kind of really have to be careful there to pick it out to get the one that you want. So I think it's going to be harder, and that bothers me a little bit. The idea that I don't know what they think about Geno Smith. I don't know if they think that Geno Smith is the guy who can get this team to the finish line. At times, I've thought they do think that, but then the more that I watch him, I think, how could you possibly think that with what we've seen since the Germany game last year? He's not playing like somebody that's going to win you a Super Bowl. Again, I'm not saying he's awful. He's physically got tools, and he has patches where he looks really good, but he's also had some seriously bad turnovers and turnover-worthy plays that by the number. So I don't think he's the answer to get Seattle to a Super Bowl. And if you are now a team that goes all in on stuff like that, it's hard to sort of think, you're doing all this and you're being aggressive and you're doing all that, and then you're going to get to the NFC divisional game, and is Geno Smith going to throw a horrendous pick? So these are the things that that's where I am with it. I'm a little bit concerned, and look, it's legit. I think it's legitimate, fair concern, because these are one of the things that I have no idea what John Schneider's planning, and won't know what John Schneider's planning until he's done it next April and May in the draft. And as somebody who wants to see them draft a quarterback and at least make an attempt to develop somebody, I'm not even saying that draft a quarterback, cut Geno, start the rookie. I'm not even saying that. I just want to see them invest in a quarterback and sort of at least try to find a cheaper long-term option, cheaper than his rookie contract, long-term option. I just want to see them do that, and not just a throwaway pick like Alex McGill either. I want to see them invest a pick in the first 3 rounds in a quarterback. They haven't done that since Russ. That's over 10 years ago now. I want to see them do it. And this makes it harder to do that because they now don't have a second rounder. So that frustrates me a little bit. And I want to see them do that. Especially when you see, look, and I'm not going to go on about, Will Levis or anything. I didn't yesterday. I'm not going to today. But, when you can get a player who can do that on his debut at the top of round 2, you kind of think, well, isn't it time to just sort of take a chance on somebody who might be able to do stuff like that? These are the things that I'm thinking with regards to Geno Smith. So, look, I think there's a fair amount of nuance there to the opinion. I think we've talked about why the lack of quality in the draft perhaps makes it more palatable to give away a second rounder. We've talked about the position within the NFC, which makes an aggressive move more understandable from a Seahawks perspective. I think we've talked about some of the risk factor that comes with drafting this particular player. And we've challenged the value of adding somebody like Leonard Williams, who is, I would argue, not a game-wrecking defensive tackle. He's a good player, not a great player, and has not had a great season for 3 years. So I think that's a fair, balanced way to view this. And I guess the only other thing to add from my perspective is that he has to be worth this now. he has to impact games. We have to sort of see I think a tangible difference with him in the lineup. You know, that he can't just be making up the numbers like Sheldon Richardson seems to be at times. He has to be really good now. I'm not saying he has to be Aaron Donald. He doesn't, but he has to be a good player. We have to watch him and go, oh yeah, you know, I noticed him in the game today. I suppose it also is a little bit, you know, I know you can't have too many defensive linemen, but does it say anything about the Draymond Jones signing that they feel like they need to go and do something like this? Is Draymond Jones a disappointment for them so far? You know, that he's not become more of a, you know, a game-wrecking type of player, because he was very expensive, and yet they've felt the need to go out and get another. And I know I argued they needed more, and they did need more than just Draymond Jones and Jaron Reed and Cam Young. But it's such an aggressive move off the back of that aggressive move in free agency that it does make you wonder a little bit whether they are a little bit underwhelmed by what they've received from Draymond Jones so far, who's been a bit, he's been okay. He's not been a difference maker, has he? So Williams has to come in. He does have to impact games. He does have to be a difference maker. Can he do that? Can he still be that kind of player? I'm not sure. And when they traded for Jadeveon Clowney was streaky and he was hit and miss. But when he was on it, he'd win you a game. He won the Niners game in Santa Clara in 2019. He won the Eagles game in the playoffs on the road in the wild card with a brilliant performance. If Leonard Williams could have a couple of games like that, then again, this might be easier to tolerate, because that was another rental for Clowney for a year. I just don't know if Leonard Williams at this stage in his career is up for doing that. I don't know if he is. And, you know, people say, well, their intention is to re-sign Leonard Williams. Their intention was to re-sign Jadeveon Clowney. It didn't happen. I'm sure when they traded for Sheldon Richardson, their intention might have been that was a long-term thing, not just a short-term thing. It didn't happen. There are other players that have probably fallen into that bracket as well. So, yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, this trade. I think if you are looking for me, as I can see in the comments, some people are just to be like really sort of, whoa, amazing, yay, big trade. I'm not going to do that. But I hope that in the discussion that I've had, I've also been balanced and have tried to provide some positives and negatives, some light and shade, pros and cons for this trade. But I must admit, it scares the crap out of me when I look at my Twitter what's happening page right now, and the top trend's Chase Young and the fifth one's Montez Sweat. Because it's not that I think that they're either, you know, both amazing players, but when it says the Detroit Lions, I'm seeing a tweet now, the Detroit Lions reportedly have interest in Chase Young, and people are talking about him. And I'm thinking, yeah, do you know what? Former second overall pick, good age, 24, interesting. Apparently the Atlanta Falcons, I'm seeing on Twitter, are interested in Montez Sweat. Interesting. 27. Ran a 4.4 at his size. Consistent production. Good age. You know, these are the kind of things I think of. You know, Leonard Williams, to me, I think a third round pick on its own or a fourth and change for a rental would have been adequate and would have got a thumbs up. I think a second's just a bit too rich for me. And I think that's a fair position to have. Charlie, good to hear from you on Super Chat. Thank you for that. C should get a fourth comp pick from Williams if they don't re-sign him, and could be getting a high third round pick from the Denver trade. Worth the risk, in my opinion. So there's a couple of things to mention here. They will not get a high third round pick from the Denver trade. The trade that they did with Denver means they get the later of the two thirds. So the only way they'll get a high third round pick is if Denver and New Orleans suck. And New Orleans currently, I'm not up to date with the standings for the NFC North, NFC South. The Saints are 4-4, and they're playing the NFC South, so they'll have opportunities to win other games. So the Seahawks are not going to be getting the Denver Broncos pick unless the Saints are worse than the Broncos. So they're probably not going to get a high third round pick, Charlie. That's important to stress. And with the comp picks, the Seahawks would need Leonard Williams to sign a big contract for to get a fourth round comp pick. The third round comp picks are for the elite free agents who get mega money. Fourth, you're still talking about a sizable contract there. And so first of all, he'd have to walk. Second of all, someone would have to pay him a massive contract. And then third, the Seahawks would have to be inactive in free agency. And I don't see that because they've got a lot of players out of contract and they're not going to be able to re-sign them all. So they are going to have to go and dip into the free agent market. And let's say Leonard Williams signs a $60 million contract, you don't have to sign someone to $60 million to cancel out that fourth round comp pick. You just have to add players. It's about added players versus lost players. So it's really hard. People talk about comp picks all the time. Oh, well, you can make this trade because you'll get a comp pick. The chances are you won't get a comp pick. Like they didn't get a comp pick I don't think they got a comp pick when Sheldon Richardson left. I mean, he didn't get a great deal, but there are players that they've traded for who've left and you don't get a comp pick because the minute that you start signing players in free agency, bye-bye comp pick. So I'd be wary of that. You're not likely to get a high comp pick unless you do nothing next year. And they don't have 2 first-round picks to fill holes this time, or 2 seconds or whatever. They don't have any seconds now. And they're going to get the New Orleans pick, not the Denver pick, I'm afraid. Joper726 says, Rob, your thoughts on the upcoming Ravens game? It's a great test, isn't it? It's the most difficult test so far. I think the Ravens are a little bit overrated. I'm not saying they're bad at all. I just don't think they're amazing. I think they're a bit streaky as well. I think they blow a bit hot and cold. I think you can get after them. I'm massively intrigued to see how the Seahawks get on in this game. It's a great game to have next. I'm fascinated to see what they can do. If they beat the Ravens, I'll be really excited by that. Am I confident that they will beat the Ravens on the road? I'm not. Especially when we last watched Lamar Jackson destroy the Seahawks when he came to Seattle 4 years ago. So I'm not excited. Sorry, I'm not expecting the Seahawks to necessarily win. I'm simply hoping that they do, and we'll be very excited if they do. But it's a great matchup to have next. And I hope it's on. They picked one game to go on British TV. I'd rather watch it on the TV than my laptop. So I hope it's on British TV this year, this week, because I think that's a really good game. Garth says, I've got to say, I appreciate your candor, Rob. Yourself on the Hawks Nest channel don't go full-on fanboy with every Hawk transaction that happens. I appreciate you saying that, Garth, and not just the super chat. I thank you for saying that. It warms my heart that people understand that that's the position I'm coming from. I'm like all of you guys out there. I'm a massive Seahawks fan. I stay up till 3 a.m. to watch preseason games. I don't miss a game. I'm going to Seattle in 3 weeks to watch the Niners game. I love watching the Seahawks, and I want the Seahawks desperately to be the best. But that doesn't mean that I have to come on the streams or write articles and be positive all the time. I give my honest opinions. When I think something's great, I'll say so. When I think something's meh, I'll say so. When I think something's bad, I'll say so. You're just going to get honesty. And sometimes some of you aren't going to like that. Some of you are going to disagree. But I'm not going to give opinions just for the sake of it. And I hope that's appreciated. When I was watching that Niners stream with Rob Stats Guerrera, who is fantastic, by the way, yesterday, and there's hearing how negative they were being about the Niners on the back of that, I thought, there's no way I could ever talk this way about the Seahawks, because people will just go, not having it. So it's a very different culture amongst the different fan bases. But I hope the majority of people appreciate that this is just one guy giving his opinion, and it comes from a place of just wanting the Seahawks to be great. And I don't get everything right with the draft and with the Seahawks, but I don't get everything wrong either. Just giving my opinions. The guy on Super Chat says, this trade is Sheldon Richardson all over again. Desperate move from a team that overrates itself. Side note, Ken Walker needs more touches. Best player on our offense, barely been involved. Is crazy. I couldn't believe that the Seahawks ran as well as they did. I know the big 45-yard run at the start kind of influenced the numbers, but I can't believe that they didn't run more. The game plan was all set up for that. They ran the ball very, very well. Charbonnet and Ken Walker ran the ball very, very well. For Geno Smith to pass nearly 40 times and for them to only, the running backs only have 13 runs was a mistake. And if I was Pete Carroll, I would have had Shane Waldron in my office today going, you don't do that again. We have to, this is a team that constantly talks about being committed to the run, commit to it. You spent 2 second-round picks on these 2 running backs. They're immensely talented and they're getting the job done. Run the ball more. It suits your offensive lineman as well. This is an offensive line. Stone Forsythe is born to run the ball. So is Bradford. So is Lewis. Go on, run the ball. And take some pressure off Geno Smith. Use the running game to your advantage by running it. Bit of play action with Geno. He's most comfortable in that. That, to me, just makes sense. What the Seahawks shouldn't be trying to do is this, throw it around the field 40 times stuff and make the run game a bit of a compliment. And hey, if we're winning, we'll run a bit at the end. Do it the other way around. That's what my hope would be. And I hope it starts this weekend. So yeah, that's what I would think on that. If you have any other super chats, get them in. Really appreciate them. Support the channel. We'll come to them straight away. I'm sort of seeing a few comments that I'm going to start dabbling in a few of these as well. Jed says, Rob, do you plan on chatting with Stats before a Niners-Hawks game? You did it a while ago and it was great. I've had him on a couple of times. I think he's fantastic. Love the fact we can have a bit of a laugh with it as well. As one of my favorite guests, in that we can really get into a few things. So yes, I'd be very interested in that. Whether it's possible for the Thanksgiving game, I'm not sure. One, because it's the Thanksgiving week, and two, because I'm going to be traveling to Seattle on Tuesday ahead of that game. And it will mean I've got very limited time to do streams. And I have no idea whether doing streams in the hotel or anything is going to be a viable option, depending on the Wi-Fi. So, or whether I'll even have the equipment to do that. So would be very interested in having Stats on. Maybe it'll be for the second game. Hopefully he'll be up for it. I think he's enjoyed coming on. But yeah, I would be up for doing a bit of that. Let's have a look what other people are saying. Like I say, super chats are the best way to get in touch, but I just want to see if there's anything else that's catching my eye at the minute. This one here from Misfit says, if you trade for Chase Young, you need to give him a mega deal at trade time plus the draft capital. Maybe. It depends on the deal, though, doesn't it? I mean, he's on pretty much a sack a game rate at the moment. And he is, if he carries that on at 24, he's more likely to get the mega deal, which gets you the comp pick, I suppose. Again, you'd have to not sign anybody. But I think that's probably more viable. And also, if Curtis is here, maybe he can help out a little bit here. The franchise tag rules are a little bit different for players. So I think it's something like you get the average of the top 5 players of your position, or a certain percentage of your contract, whichever is better, if you are franchise tagged. And it might be that that Leonard Williams is not an easy player to franchise tag, whereas Chase Young would be a much easier player to franchise tag. And even if you did that, he would, if he had a good year and you wanted to franchise him, he would have some resale value in a trade at the end of the season. So, I think it's probably it's more of an investment than this. This feels like a win now at all costs move. So, but look, I think what my best guess, if I had to have a guess of what the Seahawks have been doing this week, I would have said that Leonard Williams was one of a handful of players they were talking to teams about. I think they'll have called about Jonathan Allen again, and there may be one or two others, a defensive tackle that they've called about. I think they probably went in for Christian Wilkins in the offseason. There was a bit of chatter that when his contract situation wasn't going well, that there were teams offering picks for him, and the Dolphins were saying, no, he's out of contract in the offseason. They may have been in touch about Chris Jones when he was holding out. And I think this is what they've kind of gone, okay, well, this is the option. This is there. This is on the table. Let's go for it. I just don't know whether a second round pick feels like good value for Seattle in this respect. So, but people can disagree with that if they want to. Slacker Hero sent in a super chat saying, thoughts on Will Levis's first start. Appreciate the super chat, Slacker Hero. I'll come on to that in a second. I asked Curtis about the percentages on whatever's better, whether it's a certain percentage of your contract, and actually maybe replying to somebody else on that. So apologies. I will ignore that. Ignore me. It's a solo pod. It's live. We'll move on. Slacker Hero, thoughts on Will Levis's first start in the super chat. I mentioned yesterday, fantastic. He had one bad throw, which was a really bad throw. When he should have thrown it away, and he nearly risked an interception. Apart from that, he was pretty flawless. The last touchdown was the best because he was sort of backpedaling and he was moving backwards. And I showed a few videos when he was at Kentucky where his core is unbelievable, and his ability to throw at awkward angles and at difficult positions and drive the ball downfield is so good. That throw that he delivered there is why people like myself say things like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, because that's the kind of play that they can make. They don't need to have a great base to launch it downfield. 50, 60 yards. Will Levis is exactly the same. So when I see a play like that, you think this is what, you know, I've been talking about for a long time. What I will say is the game plan was very, very basic from Tennessee. They're not going to be able to get away with that game after game. Teams have now got tape and will confuse Will Levis with certain looks, and will know tendencies, and will know certain giveaways that he will do things that maybe give away audibles and stuff like that. I will say I was quite impressed that he was changing plays at the line, making calls and stuff like that. But how many of those has he got, you know, up his sleeve? So, yeah, there are things there that he's going to face bigger challenges as he goes forward. But there are plenty of rookies who are in the same situation, first game of the season, and they don't score 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. And he's a physical talent. He's a smart guy. He had no business lasting as long as he did, and I suspect he will not be able to copy that performance in the weeks ahead. But a great start for him, and I really hope, because people will think, oh well, Rob, you must want him to do well because it will validate your opinion on him. I will also stress that he was not QB1 on my board. CJ Stroud was. Will Levis was number 2. Anthony Richardson was number 3. Bryce Young was number 4. I don't know many people who had it in that order. Not saying that I'm proven right by anything. There's still a long way to go, and CJ Stroud lost to Bryce Young at the weekend. But I'm comfortable with where I was with that at the moment. I genuinely don't want him to be a massive success because it will be quite frustrating if the Seahawks had an opportunity to draft him not in the top 5, get Devin Witherspoon and a potential quarterback, and not done that will be a little bit frustrating. Garth says on the super chat, thank you, Garth, for a second super chat. Rob, what are your thoughts on Jamal Adams' completely intentional helmet deflection as a tribute to football outside the US? I enjoyed it very much. I was showing all my colleagues from the day job the header today, and we're all football journalists, commentators, and we all agreed it was a fantastic header and would not have looked at a place in the Premier League. So it was a well-executed header. It looked as if he was clearing a corner. So well done to Jamal Adams for probably the best play that he's made in Seattle. I thoroughly enjoyed it and thoroughly enjoyed the win at the end. Excellent. And here's to really weird, unique stuff happening again later in the year that benefits the Seahawks, because I don't think I've ever seen a game won by an interception via header before. Curtis did confirm in the end, no, that's right. Top 5 salaries are 100%, 120% of your last year, whatever is higher. So that's the thing. It might be a little bit harder to franchise Leonard Williams. If the 120% of his salary this year is more than the top 5, then it becomes harder. Obviously, with a rookie, it's not an issue. It's just top 5 salaries. So it can be a little bit easier to get franchise deals done. Charlie with another super chat says, do you think Seattle will target Van Pran or Ratledge in the draft? Can someone I don't know who Ratledge is, unless I'm just being completely dim here and can't remember. And he says, D. Lewis and Haynes are free agents. Interior O-line starting to feel like a position of need. I think I really like Cedric Van Pran and would be interested in him, although I see him as a center. I could see them going O-line. I wrote an article the other day that I think O-line is quite good next year. I think the top tackle is Goyton at Oklahoma. Then I think it's Fashanu and Mims, who are quite close together. 2 physical specimens with a lot of potential. Just need to tidy a few things up. And then other tackles who could play tackle or guard, Jack Nelson, J.C. Latham, I think are both very, very interesting players. Joe Alt's a right tackle, not a guard. And then, players who will kick inside, I think Troy Fatanu, apologies if I'm destroying the name there, the left tackle at Washington, I think has had a fantastic year. But I think he is Elijah Vera Tucker level. I think he'll go in the top 15, top 20 as a Vera Tucker type who played left tackle at USC, then would be better fit at guard because of his frame. And I think he fits into that category as well. And I think he could be a really good guard. Cooper Beebe, if anybody watched any of the Kansas State game, I did against Houston at the weekend, you will see the best hit by an offensive lineman you will see all season when he got out into space, got to the second level and absolutely hammered a defender to spring DJ Giddens, who's a good running back, for a touchdown. Fantastic play. Go and check it out. Jordan Morgan at Arizona, I think will kick into guard as well. Brandon Coleman at TCU looks pretty good. And then, so the centers, I really like Cedric Van Pran. I really like Charles Turner at LSU. I think they'll both go in the top 50. And Graham Barton, the left tackle at Duke, has 32-inch arms. So although he's playing very well at left tackle for Duke, with that kind of length, he's going to kick inside. Would I be interested in drafting any of those players? Yes, I would very much be interested in that. But it's just, I'm sorry, I don't want to be a bear with a sore ass. For me, draft a quarterback. And now the fact they haven't got a second round anymore, I would probably been very interested in a quarterback and a trenches player in the first 2 rounds. And, I think I want to see him draft a quarterback. And I don't want it to be a token gesture. I want to see him draft a quarterback. So I'm just saying. Jason sent a super chat in, says, a good Levis means one less QB needy team, though, says Jason. That may well be true, Jason. I suppose the issue with that, let me have a look now. So, like, the Giants have just got Seattle's second round pick. I think they're positioning themselves to go quarterback next year. So you will have the Patriots, I think, will be looking at quarterbacks. The Raiders will be. The Broncos might be. Although Russell's playing well. Sorry, he is playing well. He's not Russell of 5 years ago, but he is playing well. So whether it's worth paying, basically the point I'm making is whether it's worth paying basically $100 million for him to go away, that might not make as much sense these days. The Steelers should be looking at quarterbacks, whether they are or not. The Browns should be looking at quarterbacks, whether they are or not. So that's the AFC. And then in the NFC, you've got Commanders, I think, should be. I'm not a big Sam Howell guy. The Giants should be. The Rams should consider it. The Cardinals will be in that mix if they're picking first overall or second or third. The Lions might keep. I mean, they drafted Hendon Hooker, so they may well. Yeah, I like Jared Goff's playing okay, but they might stay in that zone. The Vikings will be looking at quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins is a free agent and injured now. Either way, they could do with drafting somebody. The Packers should be looking at quarterbacks. The Bears should be looking at quarterbacks. The Falcons should be looking at quarterbacks. The Saints should be looking. The Buccaneers should be looking. So that's a lot of teams. So to position yourself to get the guy that you want could be quite tricky. So that was the point I make on that. Joper726 says, Messi wins the Ballon d'Or. Do you think this was deserved? So that is a real tangent. Do I think it was deserved? I can understand why he's got it for winning the World Cup. But, with the greatest respect, he has not had a better year than Erling Haaland. So if you want to give it Messi for winning a World Cup, then fine. But Erling Haaland was the best player in world football this year, and Erling Haaland should have won the Ballon d'Or. And I seriously hope and think it's a good chance that Jude Bellingham of England will be winning the Ballon d'Or next year, the way that he is playing. So there we go. I've seen this. I think it's quite interesting, so I'm going to bring it up even though it's not a super chat. Andrew says, Rob, I really think the portal and money schools make that less and less QBs will be NFL caliber as we go forward. Well, it's an interesting take. I think we're certainly seeing that at other positions. Whether that is the case at QB, I don't know. I wonder if actually, Andrew, the opposite will happen. Because here's the thing. There are a lot of quarterbacks now who, 10 years ago, if they were stuck behind an incumbent starter, they had very little choice other than to take a year out of their lives and transfer and hope for the best. Whereas now it's a lot easier for a QB who is not starting to go and play somewhere else. And a lot of the quarterbacks who are in the league or will enter the league, aka Caleb Williams, have transferred. Caleb Williams transferred, Spencer Rattler transferred, Quinn Ewers transferred, Michael Penix transferred, Tyler Van Dyke nearly transferred, Bo Nix transferred, Cam Ward transferred. So, Jaden Daniels transferred. Talia Tagovailoa transferred. Sam Hartman transferred. Devin Leary's transferred. So, all of these quarterbacks are transferring and sort of moving around. So, it actually means that you get a bigger pool of players. So, if someone who, commits to LSU can't get in at LSU, that means somebody else, Arizona State, whoever, gets a player who they perhaps wouldn't have been in the running for as a recruit, but now they get to go and play there because they want to be able to start. They want to show what they're about. So I actually think the pool of quarterbacks is going to spread out because of the transfer portal a lot more. And we're going to see more and more players get opportunities, which I think is a good thing. And players who didn't start at certain schools because they were like, I want to go to Ohio State. I want to go to Alabama. Will suddenly go, Fresno State. I want to go and play there. And that's a good thing. So I actually I think I disagree with you. I think we're going to see more and more quarterbacks who are intriguing, and whether or not they're pro ready or not, I don't know. But it's very easy to look at CJ Stroud and think, well, he didn't play in a pro style offense. He's doing all right. Will Levis did play in a pro style offense. He had a good start. Bryce Young has not had a good start, but it's early in the careers. I mean, if it was me, if I was a coach and a GM and I drafted a quarterback, I'd sit them for a year anyway. I'd just sit them for the first year. Take your lumps. But that's me. Garth Knight says, Rob, weird question here. Could Russ and Belichick team up for one last shot at glory? That sounds like more like a sitcom than a partnership in the NFL. The Odd Couple, starring Russell Wilson and Bill Belichick. They do not seem like a mix to me. I kind of get the sense that Russell's probably going to play for the Broncos or nobody else, because his contract is so big that, if he gets cut, then the Broncos are kind of sending a message to everybody else in the league that, nah. So, I don't know. I think Russell has shown enough this year to suggest that while he may never be a top 5 quarterback again, he ain't the problem in Denver. And they need to sort their defense out, their offensive line. They need to get Russell some proper weapons. I've never, as soon as Jerry Jeudy came into the league, it's just something off-putting about him. And Cortland Sutton's always been overrated. They've never been able to get a tight end who can either stay healthy or be properly productive. They need to support him, I would suggest, rather than necessarily spending tens of millions to move on from him, especially now that they're 3-5. They're not going to get Caleb Williams. So, I'm looking at Russell Wilson's numbers, 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I mean, that's after 8 games. So he's on pace for, between 32 and 35 touchdowns here. That's a good season for Russ. Quarterback rating of 101.7. He's been sacked 26 times, which is more than anybody else other than Sam Howell, who's unbelievably been sacked 41 times so far. So, yeah, I don't think Russell's necessarily a problem. It seems to be sort of working out a little bit with him and Sean Payton. So, and Sean Payton does have these streaky. He did it in New Orleans where he'd win about 6 in a row, and then he'd lose 6 in a row. So, I don't know if they'll part, and if they do, that may well be it for us. I don't know. So, yeah, he's not the same player as he was, but I don't know if it's worth paying to get rid of him. If there are any more super chats, send them in now, because I'm going to wrap this up. We've nearly done an hour. If anybody wants to say anything about the Leonard Williams trade, or if there is anything else Seahawks related they want to ask, super chat away, and I will come to that. In the meantime, I'll just sort of give a closing thought that, I'm really interested to see what Leonard Williams can do. I hope. I've always liked Leonard Williams as a player. I didn't really think he was a top, because when he came in the draft, everyone was like, oh, top, might be the best player and stuff like that. I just kind of thought, yeah, maybe it's just like classic USC defender. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you think of like an Alabama defensive tackle. You think of like Jonathan Allen and Jaron Reed and like glass-eating beast. And Leonard Williams, a USC defensive tackle. You just don't think that. You think of, there's a bit of a softer image there. And he was always a bit of a finesse player, I thought, coming into the draft. Didn't work for him with the Jets. Always a bit sort of flattered to deceive. Was traded to the Giants for a 3rd-round pick. Had that one great year in 2020. Parlayed that into a new contract. Has never lived up to the expectations since. And he's got to play with Dexter Lawrence which helps. And he's never put a production up. So a good player, not a great player. I hope that he can have a major impact. I suspect that he will be a decent player for the Seahawks. He's not going to be bad. I don't think he's going to be a difference maker. They did need a bit more up front. Is he going to tilt it in a big way? I'm not sure. I wish it was Jonathan Allen that they traded for. I'd have lived with a 2nd-round pick for Jonathan Allen. I just love that guy. Love the attitude, love the way he plays. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't understand this comment from Ronald. You forget this is a really young team loaded with young players. Whenever I said that, anything else other than that, Do they really need more draft choices, or do they need some veterans? I think it's a great trade. Well, yeah, but the foundation of the team has been built around good drafting. And now they're going away from that with this trade. And also, why do they need, what? Because they're a young team with good young players, why does that mean that doesn't mean anything for the value of the Leonard Williams trade, does it? We can dissect the trade. It's not a good trade just because Leonard Williams is 29. You have to say, okay, how good is the player? What's the contract situation? What's the longevity of this? What are you actually getting? Okay, we're getting a 29-year good, not great player who's currently 37th ranked on PFF amongst defensive tackles, who's out of contract. So it's a 10-game rental as things stand. They've not got lots of money. They've got $6 million to spend next year in order to get a load of players re-signed or replaced. This feels very much like a very ultra-aggressive move for Leonard Williams. Let's discuss the value. That's the thing. That's what we have to discuss. I don't think we can say, oh, well, they're a young team. They've drafted well, so now they just need to go and chuck picks away on older players. That's not how... I don't agree with that. Pindingo says this question. This has caught my eye. How good actually is Quinn Ewers? Do you see him playing next year? I'm fascinated by Quinn Ewers. It's one of my favorite things to talk about and discuss with regards to the draft, because he is extremely naturally talented. He has got, I've talked about it before, just a flick of the wrist and the ball comes out. That Aaron Rodgers, just a flick. He's got amazing, just a little, it's unbelievable how he can generate so much downfield velocity with a flick of the wrist. Very compact motion. Ball comes out very quickly, gets it out there, can throw from different angles, but also just quick release, shoots downfield. Very, very impressive. GMs and scouts will love that about him. He is erratic. He does turn the ball over. He does make some mistakes. The Sarkisian offense is quite user-friendly. A lot of check downs, a lot of dump offs, a lot of short stuff to get easy completions. But he has shown that he can throw it deep and he can make difficult plays. He's a good athlete, not an amazing athlete. There is an injury history. Injured last year, now injured again. Do I see him playing next year? Do you mean whether as an NFL starter? Because if you do, I wouldn't want that. I'd want to sit him for a year, but I would want to sit any rookie QB for a year. I think the bigger concern now is the questions that I would ask is, one, is he going to play again this year? Two, is he going to declare? Because what do? Do you come back and then lose your job to Arch Manning? Do you transfer somewhere else? Do you want to stay another year in college football if you keep getting hurt? What's the draft grade that he's hearing from people? Tony Pauline reported a few weeks ago that he was 50-50 on entering the draft. So there's a lot of things to work out here. I think John Schneider will be a big fan of his. The concern really for me is the erratism and the injuries. And he's played at 195 pounds this year, which is very, very light. And that worries me a little bit. He'd need to be bigger than that. Someone has said he sounds like Drew Lock 2.0. They're very different players. Drew Lock's big, strong, 6 foot, could probably play tight end. That's Drew Lock. Quinn Ewers is more of I think he is, 6'2", 6'3", but he's not a big guy with a big muscles, throw it downfield, massive arm. He's just that sort of natural, his technique is the thing that enables him to generate the ball downfield. And Drew Lock's more like power thrower, almost of that Allen Herbert style when he throws it. This is more of an Aaron Rodgers release, I would say. He is closer to Aaron Rodgers than probably a lot of other quarterbacks who've been compared to Aaron Rodgers. Similar stature, similar release. And for that reason, he's an intriguing player and a reason why I think John Schneider will be interested. I'm intrigued by him. I currently have him in round 2 and I have him ahead. Spoiler alert, I've moved him ahead of Michael Penix Jr. I've studied both of them a lot. The last 2 games, I'm willing to sort of mix these things around. But Michael Penix, for me, has struggled under pressure. And in the last couple of games, I will go into more detail with that probably in an article later this week. But I'm still having him in round 2. But I've put Quinn Ewers ahead of him. So there you go. Bit of a spoiler alert there. But an interesting player, and someone I'm sure we'll continue to discuss. This from Nick says, with the amount of QB-needy teams, who could Seattle get that could be an improvement? I don't think it's a case of getting an improvement necessarily that's an immediate improvement. I just want to just invest in somebody. Find somebody that you like and invest in them. It's time to try and develop somebody. And I don't buy that year after year that there are no quarterbacks. Go and draft somebody. This is a good draft to do it because there's a few names in there. I've just talked about one of them for the last 5 minutes. But whether it is him, whether it's Spencer Rattler, whether it is Michael Penix, whether it's Riley Leonard, whether it's Will Howard, whether it's Bo Nix, whether it's Tyler Van Dyke, draft somebody and try to make them an improvement. You don't have to start straight away. Start Geno next year if you want, but on a reduced contract. Start Drew Lock. Sign somebody else who can throw 9 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. They don't have to start straight away. But, draft somebody and develop them. It's time. But Nick, I appreciate the super chat. I think of the long overdue drafting a quarterback. It is what it is, says, thank you, Rob. What are we going to do to enhance this D-line even more? I'm torn between giving up capital and seeing what young depth can do. Well, look, if the right deal comes along, I'd carry on. If you're going to do this, then do it. If a great trade pops along, you've got to do it. But it's like with what money? They don't have any left. They've needed the Giants. They've essentially bought money off the Giants by giving them a second-round pick instead of a third so that the Giants eat the salary. And the Giants have basically bought a second-round pick rather than a third. So I'm not sure they've got the money to do anything else. If there was a chance to get another great edge, go for it. You can't have enough good edge rushers, but it has to be for the right price. You can't be... We're now going to, overpay for Carl. Like if they turn around tonight and give like a third for Carl Lawson in New York, I'm going to have a little cry. I'll be honest. But if they could get him for a 7th, well, what the hell? Chuck it in. Garth with another one. It's so funny. I recall hearing Hawks fans say we could get Chase Young for a 3rd. Yet here we are with Leonard Williams for a 2nd. It's always more. Yeah, the thing that bothers me, the Roquan Smith comparison, that Roquan Smith cost a 2nd and a 5th. And it's 25 at the trade, and Leonard Williams is 29 and is going to be 30 next year. For the same price for 10 games and nothing more at this stage it's a little bit. I think that says it all about the value. Anyway, we've done over an hour. Thank you to everybody who's joined in. I can't believe how many people are watching live, given it's just me and I've been sat here talking to myself for an hour. So thank you for that. Thank you for all of the super chats. It is massively appreciated. Massively appreciated. One last favor to request of you all, like the video. It really helps. And if you would be willing to subscribe so you don't miss a video, even better. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. There's an article up there discussing a few more of these Leonard Williams topics on there. Please check it out. Don't forget, we'll be back after the game against the Ravens for the post-game live stream. So join us for that, and please do join in. Appreciate you all, and good luck to the Seahawks against the Ravens this week. Until next time, bye for now. See you later.